we're back. This is Elliot Serrano and Jose Melendez coming to you from Dreamland Comics in Schaumburg, Illinois. Today we're joined by Avi for another rousing round of discussion. We have reviewed Batman and Robin. We have addressed the implied rape scene in Ultimate Avengers number 5, which Mark Millar himself denies it was a rape scene. But let's not just pick on one writer, because many commenters on the CCW boards and on the CCW blog were vocal in expressing their objections to other types of other depictions of violence that they saw in other books. And really right now, which is really paining me to say this because I'm such a big fan of his, but James Robinson right now is pissing off a lot of folks. He's pissing folks off in his Justice League stuff, which I started reading and then I dropped. So I don't know what the most recent thing that he did that pissed everybody off was. So if somebody could bring me up to speed, I'd appreciate it.
I stopped reading Justice League after the second issue that he wrote.
I mean, James Robinson, you're a fan of James Robinson, Starman.
Starman, big time,
right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think is this. Do we even know this is the same James Robinson? For God's sakes, it doesn't read like the same James Robinson at all to me.
Well, I mean, it's my understanding that one, there were some depictions of violence against the Dr. Light character. Okay.
Yeah,
Right?
in Justice League, yeah.
And then in Cry for Justice, some bad stuff went down with Speedy's kid.
Well, first of all, in issue 5 of this, which came out like 3 months ago, Arsenal gets his arm ripped off, and they had a nice full splash page of showing that. And then in issue 7, which came out a while ago, it's also, yes, Speedy, or Arsenal, Speedy, whatever, Red Arrow, whatever the hell you want to call him now, his kid gets killed. Prometheus. Yeah, that's the awesome money shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, it's bad enough that his arm got ripped off, but then his daughter, his 4-year-old daughter, gets killed. Prometheus kills his daughter in issue 7. This comic, we haven't reviewed this comic at all, and I had a lot of people ask us to review it. It is so terrible that I that's all I can really say about it. I get no enjoyment out of this book at all.
Did you see what the cover of this thing is? Like what the title of it is? Love and Dismemberment? Really? This gotta be like a joke. I didn't even realize that until now. Love and Dismemberment. Classy.
There has been some blog, the blogosphere in the comics blogosphere have talked about that scene. Right now it's being called superhero torture porn.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, that was on IO9.
IO9, yeah. Just recently. Well, not it was a while back, but I'm just saying I just recently discovered it.
No, they call it tragedy porn.
Tragedy porn.
That's
but
what they call
superhero
it.
Tragedy porn.
Yeah.
When tragedy porn hits superhero comics.
And it's kind of been going on with comics for like the last 2-3 years.
It has. It seems like writers feel that they need to up the body count in books, so then that way you can elicit an emotional reaction.
But it's so crass and shallow in most comics. I mean, how many characters have been killed in Teen Titans in the last 2 years? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, and a lot of folks have Teen Titan readers really feel abused that way. It seems like
I had to drop that book a while ago because it was just getting ridiculous.
Yeah, their characters just dying left and right. It's like, now a Titan dies again.
Jeez. Yeah. And then they release like a one shot that comes out like a Titan will die in this issue. Yeah. Like they have to release a one shot just so another Titan can die because it can't fit in the monthly.
And the thing that's kind of getting me is that wasn't that really what Jeff Johns was addressing with Blackest Night, at least in the beginning, thematically? How much death would occur in comics. And what I got from those first couple issues of Blackest Night, when Barry Allen and Hal Jordan are looking back on the history of all the people who have died in the DCU, how tragic it is, and I was kind of getting the sense that they thought of those deaths as unnecessary. Kind of like Jeff Johns was saying, gee, why did you need to kill all these characters, you know?
Johns kills a lot of characters
Well, maybe I'm not reading it right. Maybe
didn't Jeff Johns have Superboy like rip off people's heads and beat them to death with their own arms and shit? I mean, sorry.
Right, you're talking Superboy Prime.
There's only one Superboy in my heart. That's Superboy Prime. I don't know. I guess Superboy Prime.
Yeah, Superboy Prime.
Or whatever. Superman Prime. Do you think they call him Superboy anymore? I think they can, right?
No, they can now. Yeah.
Okay.
That's been settled.
Yeah.
So now we can go back
He's
to
no
the
longer Connor Kent.
I mean, the Infinite Crisis on Infinite Worlds of Crisisness. That thing, there was people dying constantly. Like Panthra got her head knocked off, and Wildebeest, both Teen Titans characters, by the way.
The deal really must hate the Teen Titans.
Yeah, like he hates Nightwing, and Nightwing,
almost was supposed to die in that.
Yeah, I think Dan Didio might be under the impression that the comics are real, and he hates Dick Grayson so much that he wants to hurt everyone around him. Watch out, Coriander, whatever. Is it Coriander?
That's what I want. How I want to pronounce it. Every time I see her name, I want to pronounce it Coriander.
I do too. That's what I think it's. I think Marv Wolfman was just like a little, stay-at-home chef type of guy. And he's like, Coriander, this is fantastic. I'm putting this one in.
But something that that we had talked about earlier is that it all this kind of seems to coincide with the removal of the comics code. The arbitrary just removal off the cover, and it seems like too much of
it's been gone for a while. It's been gone for a while.
But this shit's been going on for a while too.
But it seems like it's just picking up speed. The car is accelerating. How's that for tying into the real world timeliness? But it just seems like really like everything just keeps snowballing in this violent situation. I only hope that the whole brightest day, heroic age will get people to kind of rein back a little bit on all the violence and all the. I don't even care about the violence. I mean, we talk about comic books where people punch each other on a page by page basis. But like you said, I don't want to see the tragedy anymore. I have enough tragedy in my life.
Right.
Look where I am.
Well, that was another point that Morlock made, our commenter on the boards. He's like, you know what? When we were talking about this Ultimate Adventure, he's like, and we had talked about this too, about how comics are supposed to be seen as a way of escapism.
Escapist
and especially being in the U.S. and the shit that's been going on with the economy and just things are kind of bad. It's like you kind of really want to get away. Like everyone probably has some form of tragedy in their life going on right now, just because. And then to go and to use your escapist, your hobby that you're supposed to get away from, and then you're just getting browbeat over the head with the same kind of bullshit in there.
Okay, so tell me, now, I don't see a parental advisory on this one.
Right, there hasn't been one on any of them.
So you had Speedy getting his arm ripped off. It's a pretty graphic, gory depiction.
Yeah,
and there was no parental advisory on it. Mm-hmm. And I'll at least for. But then on Ultimate Avengers here,
you can barely see it. It's in the barcode, right?
I can't really. Even the font that they use, if it blends in like it's part of the barcode. Mm-hmm. I do want to say this, and this was something that I was kind of thinking about during the discussion that was going on in the boards after I wrote my post until we got to taping here, because a lot of the talk about the comics code was brought up. What happened to us? Because if we were teenagers ourselves and reading this, I seriously doubt we'd be having this kind of a problem with it.
I don't know. When I remember reading The Killing Joke, and that was when I was a teenager.
Right. And
there's a tiny little panel where they show Commissioner Gordon being driven insane by all the images of Barbara Gordon, and I remember seeing him being like, "That is terrible." And of course, I love Alan Moore's and I love Brian Bowen. But I remember reading that being like, ugh, I don't like this.
But see, the thing though with The Killing Joke though is that was done the way that you said that this whole thing should have been done.
Sure.
It wasn't done as gratuitously.
Right.
The character. It wasn't that you saw. Because Commissioner Gordon's supposed to be naked through that whole scene. You didn't see his genitalia hanging out.
No.
There is a scene where the Joker shoots Barbara Gordon, and on top of that, undresses her afterwards. Right. So he can take photos of her after she's been shot and lying in the ground.
I'm saying, when I was a teenager, I wasn't like, yeah, bring on the violence.
No, which is exactly what's going on now. Like, and that's why kids are buying more killers
these days. Yeah.
But I think it's the portrayal of it, though. Because, again, when you see this is done, again, kind of...
Well, one is done well, one is done poorly. But just the very fact that it had that violence in there, I mean, was shocking to me. Because again... talking about the context, this is the context of a comic book versus a movie or whatever. We had different things to expect, you know. I mean, nowadays I think that difference has been lost. It's a lot more blended. Like, you know, comic books can be just as violent as video games and movies, and it's all you know, the same. And again, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing to have violence in comics as long as there's some kind of parental advisory and it's done well. Like, I don't think there's a problem with it as long as it's done to serve a purpose and not just for this, like, torture porn, tragedy porn type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but then again, I mean, again, I'm even trying to play the advocate with myself. I'm trying to figure out, really, why do I have this problem?
Oh, against the violence itself?
Against the violence itself. Because first, they are comics, you know. I read, you know, there've always been violent comic books. There are a lot of folks who are going to say, well, if kids are exposed to this kind of violence, they're going to grow up to be, you know, murderers and rapists who rape murderers. But, I mean, I read violent... Again, we talk about The Killing Joke. Right. There's been a lot of really... Watchmen had a much more graphic depiction of rape than this book did. I read it. I was offended by it. I was turned off. And I didn't grow up to be a sociopath. So... Yeah,
you know, and I think a lot of it comes to the fact that, you know... With this comic, it just seems like it doesn't seem to be couched in any type of drama. It just seems very, very blah and very, you know.
But again, not putting aside the fact that maybe we can argue that it was a poorly written.
So we say we don't want to have any of this kind of violence in comics.
No, I'm just saying. No. Why argue against it then? Why? I mean, if it's going to be there,
I think a little bit of it, and this is going to go back to your Watchmen point. Like, it didn't bother me in Watchmen because those characters were in that story. They weren't. Nobody was playing with the toys in the toy box and fucking around with them. With the Avengers, even though these are the ultimate versions of the Avengers, it's still Captain America. It's still Red Skull. It's still characters that you grew up with, and you know, really, it's like, why desecrate the characters to such a degree? You know, like, do we really need to have people's arms getting ripped off? To like, I mean, if you want to show the guy's arm get ripped off, which is, by the way. Going back to this thing, I mean, it's fine. They've done it before. I mean, Green Lantern had his, or didn't Green Arrow have his arm ripped off, or was going to be ripped off? In The Dark Knight, he had his arm ripped off. I mean, all that kind of stuff.
In Dark Knight, yeah.
It's like, I mean, or maybe he'd already had his ripped off, or whatever. But it's like, I mean, that's fine. You want to show the consequence, but I don't need to see a gory stump. I mean, it's not an EC comic. I mean, there's no reason for it.
But you bring up EC Comics too. I mean, the EC Comics would get this same kind of reaction.
Well, that's the reason why the Comics Code was created. Was because of EC Comics.
And yet, you can say that there was some artistic merit to what they did in EC
Well, they
Comics.
weren't superhero. They weren't masquerading as superhero comics. They were horror comics. I mean, I have no problem with violence in a horror movie. I would have a problem if I'm watching the Superman movie, and again, I'm talking about movies here, and there was suddenly people getting their arms ripped off. I would have a huge problem with it. So the same thing goes with comics. I have a huge problem with. I don't want to see my superheroes ripping off arms and beating off people's heads, kicking off heads and stuff. It's just not. Did I say beating off heads?
Yeah.
I do want to see that, Mark Millar. Yeah. If you can show people beating off heads, that'd be great. No,
but
Millar, I call him. He's gonna hate that. Miller. He's not gonna watch this anyway. I just think that again, Watchmen. They did it to people, to characters that were created for that story. That was their purpose. No problem with that. V for Vendetta. No problem with that. Also written by an excellent writer, but having stuff happen to characters that used to be on the Super Friends. And used to be like I used to have toys of. Kind of have a problem with that a little bit. Well,
that was. I mean, when we first started these videos, and a lot of the complaints that we would have would be about Bendis comics, and because he is doing that to characters that we grew up with characters, established characters that had been around. They're not like ultimate versions. I mean, Bendis is doing stuff in New Avengers and Dark Avengers with well-established, decade-old characters that we've liked.
Like the Tigra thing.
Which was completely ridiculous. Right. And, no one really raised a stink about it when that happened 2 years ago.
It was, a couple folks raised a stink about it.
Yeah, on blogs,
and they were shouted down.
Right.
It was you were basically told, why are you making such a big deal about this? Just accept it. Shut up about it already.
Why do you hate creativity?
Right, pretty much. And I hate to say it, but someone on the Miller board Miller World boards talked about how Mark Miller was being so courageous.
Yeah, I know, right?
And making portraying some of the things in this book that he did. I'm like, it's not courage. That you don't get courage from writing this.
Right.
You don't need courage to write this. You need an editor that'll let you do whatever the hell you want. Because trust me, I know there have been several other writers that have been wanting to put that kind of stuff in these books, but they've been told, no, you can't. You can't.
And I think this is, this might come out wrong, and I'm going to apologize for it in case that it does. But this has been coming up on our boards a lot with one of our commenters by the name of Smartass. How you can have these violent depictions of women and men in Marvel Comics. Okay, you can have this kind of stuff in Marvel Comics. There's all these things you can have in Marvel Comics, but God forbid you show a character smoking in Marvel Comics.
Yeah.
And this is here's all right. Here's where I might get in a little bit of trouble. So, Joe Quesada comes into Marvel. He's editor-in-chief, all right? Joe Quesada actually had a family member of his die from smoking cancer, and he made the editorial decision that there's be no smoking in comics, okay? In Marvel Comics, as long as he's editor-in-chief. Joe Quesada has a problem with the X-Men, and there's too many damn mutants in the universe. So, you know what? We're going to have almost all the mutants just lose their powers and depower all of them except for the X-Men. That was his problem that he had, and he took it upon editor. And another problem that Joe Quesada had was that there can be no more good stories told with Peter Parker anymore because he's married. That's his personal feeling. And that's why they had Joe Quesada got rid of the marriage and had Peter Parker make a deal with the devil. Because Joe Quesada didn't like these things.
But, see...
So the mandate's coming down.
It's fine, but that's what an editor-in-chief does.
Right, okay.
Jim Shooter would do the same
But these are personal politics, all right? Now, here's... more I might step in it. So, what does it take to get this kind of bullshit out of Marvel Comics? Does Joe Quesada need some kind of personal story to attach to? Are
you saying that someone should be throwing out his
baby,
someone in his family out of a window? Like
no. But has Joe Quesada ever? Does he know anybody, or does he have any personal stories about sexual assault? Does he have a story where it would affect him? But that's what I'm saying. All these things affect him personally, and that's why he makes it. Is that what it's going to take for the mandate to finally come down? And I'm not saying that something bad like that should happen, but when you're making personal politics and you're running the company like that, like what's it going to take for you to change something about that?
But it's drama. I mean, you're doing this. To me, the smoking thing I think is a little ridiculous because there's really no reason why you shouldn't be able to show someone smoking in the same way, like, you know, you have somebody brandishing a firearm. I mean, what's the difference, you know? Yeah. I mean, you don't have to glorify it. Don't have it be like your favorite superhero smoking. Right. Maybe it might be a problem with Wolverine smoking versus, say, you know, the Red Skull having a cigarette or something like that. I don't know. But, I mean, personally, again, I don't think any of us are saying, like, we should have no violence in comics. Just, like, when you have it be so gratuitous and so commonplace, it becomes mind-numbing. You're just going to get numb to the violence of it.
Right.
I mean, if the whole point is to make it so that it's not dull and it's got to have a few more shocks, to quote Miller, I mean, really, now it's become shocking if there's no one getting killed. I mean, if there's a Teen Titans comic with no one getting killed,
right?
If they're like having like a picnic, you know, like a day in the life, like the old George Perez, Marv Wolfman stuff, you'd be like, this is shocking.
Well, the cover should say, "This issue, a Titan lives."
Yeah, all Titans live.
And the other thing that kind of
have a very nice day.
And the other thing that kind of bothers me about that whole, you know, we have enough boring comics out there, we need shocks, you know, to spice things up. It's like, what does he think about comics like Unwritten? Or comics like Jeff Parker's Underground, or Ages of Atlas, where there is none of this gratuitous bullshit in it, but those are some of the best written books on the market.
Well, it's hard to be clever and funny and interesting, which Mark Miller used to be very interesting.
He used to be, yes.
I mean, Red Son's very interesting. He used to write a Superman Adventures book. That was a fantastic book.
His run on Flash, I really enjoyed.
It was really good,
Run on Flash.
But, I mean, after a while, you know, when you're doing so many comics, you have so many projects, it gets hard to, like, make things be interesting, right? I mean, you're a writer, so it's like, you got, at some point, it's just like, hey, you know what's a lot easier? Shock value. Work for Madonna. I wanted to work Madonna into this conversation for some reason.
And you just killed it.
Madonna beating off heads.
I'm pretty sure she had a book of that in the 80s.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah.
When we come back, we will move on to the issue of women in comics and Marvel's attempt at some sort of redemption here, which is just not working.
Is that really what it is?
Yeah, that's what we think. You will want to join us. We'll see you then.